In this video, I'm going to take an extensive look back at the Terminator. Let's get started. Directed by James Cameron, the Terminator is a story that revolves around a cyborg assassin sent back in time to what was then the present day of 1984 to eliminate Sarah Connor, whose son John Connor would eventually lead the human rebellion against Skynet, an artificial intelligence which uses an army of killing machines called Terminators in a war on humanity. Meanwhile, Kyle Reese, a human soldier from the future, also arrives, whose mission is to protect Sarah Connor. As the Terminator cuts a swath through the city trying to kill Sarah, Reese tries to keep her alive, as the fate of the human race lies in the balance. The idea for the Terminator began with a nightmare that James Cameron had in the early 1980s. In the dream, he saw a metallic torso drag itself in an explosion, which then inspired him to write the script for the film. Cameron's vision was to create a film that would not only showcase cutting-edge technology, but also tell an engaging, compelling story. Cameron wanted to create a character that was neither good nor bad, but exists entirely for a specific purpose. Initially, Cameron had a difficult time convincing studios to finance the project. Eventually, he convinced the production company Hemdale to back the film, and the Terminator was born. One of the significant factors that contributed to the success of the Terminator is the cast and crew. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had previously played the lead role in Conan the Barbarian, had mostly played supporting roles, but was most well known for being a bodybuilding champion. Schwarzenegger began lifting weights aged 15 and won the Mr. Universe title aged 20, and subsequently the Mr. Olympia title 7 times. Originally, however, Schwarzenegger was considered by the producers to play the heroic character of Reese, which Cameron wasn't keen on. Cameron envisaged the Terminator as an average-looking person who could blend into a crowd. Lance Henriksen, who would go on to play the character of Lieutenant Vukovich in the film, was considered for the Terminator, as was O.J. Simpson. But Simpson was eventually rejected for the role, given the common belief at the time was that no one could take Simpson seriously as a killer. And sure, look at him, he wouldn't hurt a fly. Cameron did agree to meet Schwarzenegger to discuss the role of Reese, but with the intention of starting a fight with him, reasoning that he wouldn't want to work with him afterward. However, during the meeting, Cameron was won over by Schwarzenegger's personality, and especially when the latter suggested that he was interested in playing the Terminator.
I went to meet with Arnold, found him to be charming, and the entire time that I was talking to him during that lunch, I was thinking, you'd make a great Terminator. He had such a strength of presence that I knew it would translate to the screen.
The character of Reese eventually went to relatively unknown actor Michael Biehn. Biehn had aspirations to become a serious actor, work with the likes of Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, and thought that the Terminator, which at first looked like a silly B movie, was beneath him. But after reading the script and meeting Cameron, he was more enthusiastic. Biehn, who in my opinion gives the best performance in the film, studied war veterans like the Polish resistance of World War II to prepare for the role. The crucial character of Sarah Connor went to Linda Hamilton, who was another relatively unknown name. Hamilton brought a vulnerable, but at the same time a sense of strength to the role, and has great chemistry with Biehn. The special effects used in the Terminator were groundbreaking for their time. The movie was made on a relatively modest budget of $6.5 million. That probably wouldn't cover the catering budget in Cameron's Avatar movies these days. But Cameron used innovative techniques to create the illusion of a larger production. One example of this is the use of practical effects, such as prosthetic makeup, to create injuries and wounds, rather than relying solely on computer-generated imagery. This resulted in a more visceral and realistic-looking film that was more thrilling to audiences. Additionally, Cameron had more time than he expected to prep the film, as Schwarzenegger had a commitment to film Conan the Destroyer, and the production had to wait for him for several months. This gave Cameron time to prep every detail of the film, and his experience working on several low-budget Roger Corman productions like Battle Beyond the Stars proved invaluable here. While the Terminator works on many different levels, such as an action film and a science fiction film, it is at its core a horror film. The whole structure of the movie is not dissimilar to the likes of slasher films like John Carpenter's Halloween and Friday the 13th. Later Terminator sequels would move away from this and become more like large-scale action blockbusters. In this way, the Terminator movies had a very similar fate to the Alien franchise. I'll talk more about this in my later Terminator videos, but if the franchise has any future, it really should return to its low-budget horror roots. So the movie begins what was then the present day of 1984, as the Terminator arrives in a burst of electricity. Right from the start, Schwarzenegger is an extremely intimidating presence, with his massive frame and robotic movements. Eating clothing, the Terminator demands a bunch of punks to give him their clothes. One of the punks here is played by the late, great Bill Paxton, who, like Arnie, would be a frequent collaborator with Cameron. Here, he begins his hat trick of being killed on screen by a Terminator, Alien, and a Predator. Meanwhile, Kyle Reese, a human soldier of the Resistance, also arrives from the future. After stealing some clothes off a homeless person, he escapes from police officers in a department store. This scene conveys Reese as a desperate and strong, but vulnerable compared to the Terminator. Right away you get the impression that Reese has been through some serious shit, and is well used to hiding and fleeing from his life. After stealing a shotgun and barely able to conceal it in his coat, Reese goes to a telephone booth. Yes kids, back in the day there were these little booths that had telephones, and you actually had to use a phone book to find someone's number. Reese finds 3 women listed as Sarah Connor and rips the page of the book, which is very inconsiderate if you ask me. In contrast to the Terminator, however, while Reese is portrayed as a dangerous man, he clearly doesn't want to kill anyone to accomplish his mission. We're then introduced to Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. Sarah's conveyed as a fairly ordinary girl, pretty, but by no means a bombshell, yet she ends up being the central focus of the film and has the biggest character arc. Meanwhile, the Terminator, after acquiring a vehicle, goes gun shopping at a local gun store and selects 3 different weapons: a 12-gauge autoloader shotgun, a 45 caliber with laser sighting, and an Uzi 9mm. If I have to nitpick here for a second, I don't really understand why the Terminator would need a gun with a laser sight. We see later that the Terminator's vision includes a HUD with all sorts of detailed information, in red, so a laser-sighted gun doesn't give him any advantage really. Anyway, the Terminator decides to take the guns he's chosen. Unfortunately for the gun store owner though, the Terminator doesn't carry a credit card and decides on a different form of payment.
You can't do that.
Wrong.
Customer's always right, I guess. Anyway, as the Terminator gathers his arsenal, he starts murdering all the Sarah Connors he can find listed in the phone book. Meanwhile, Reese customizes his stolen shotgun for better concealment, which is rather neatly referenced in the later Terminator Salvation. It's around here that we're introduced to the 2 great supporting characters who provide a lot of this film's humour: Lieutenant Vukovich and Lieutenant Traxler, played respectively by Lance Henriksen and the late great Paul Winfield. Despite being a dark, dystopian sci-fi horror film, during my most recent rewatch, I was surprised at how funny the movie actually is at certain points. While there is some very black comedy regarding the Terminator himself, Vukovich and Traxler have a great buddy cop relationship going on here, and it really says something about these 2 actors that in a very short space of time, you get the impression that these 2 have worked together for a long time, and mock each other so often.
Well, how do I look?
Like shit, boss.
Yo, mama.
Seriously, I would have watched a spin-off movie or TV series about just these 2. While Sarah stood up by her date, she goes out by herself, while her roommate Ginger spends the evening with her boyfriend. We see Reese following her, who clearly has one advantage over the Terminator, that he knows which Sarah Connor is the actual target. Unfortunately for Ginger and her boyfriend, the Terminator spoils their evening and kills them both, with Ginger being executed in a case of mistaken identity. Sarah, having heard of 2 other Sarah Connors being murdered, suddenly realizes she is the next possible target and phones Ginger, not realizing that she's exposing her identity and location to the Terminator, which realizes its mistake and goes to the nightclub Tech Noir to kill her. The Tech Noir sequence is one of the standout scenes of the film. Despite the tension, there is still little black comedy as the Terminator effortlessly crushes the hand of a bouncer. Maybe it's just me, but I've always found that funny. It's here as the Terminator closes in on his target that Cameron employs a technique of gradually going into slow motion before all hell breaks loose. This is something Cameron will continually do in his future films like Aliens and Terminator 2. Reese appears and manages to stop the Terminator temporarily by shooting it several times with a shotgun, and it's here where we first hear what would become the 2nd most iconic line of the entire series.
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
You want to live? Come on!
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live.
Hey, no! You come with me or you're dead in the next 30 seconds.
Reese and Sarah escape the nightclub with the Terminator in pursuit. It's during the next few scenes as they are chased by both the police and the Terminator that a lot of the movie's exposition is provided. One of the most genius aspects of this movie, and the reason why it's so fast-paced, is how its exposition is delivered. This is something that trips up many screenwriters. Many films have what is often referred to as the exposition dump scene, where a lot of necessary information and backstory is given out, and it can really stop a movie in its tracks. What's great about The Terminator is that for first-time viewers, the reveal of what the Terminator actually is, where it comes from, and most importantly, why it's after Sarah specifically, is given out in these scenes during very tense chases and while Reese and Sarah are trying to evade capture by the police and being killed by the Terminator. The Terminator eventually finds Reese and Sarah in a parking garage, and the chase continues out into the high streets, ending with the Terminator crashing into a wall and Reese and Sarah being caught by the police. If I have to again nitpick the movie here, it's a little unbelievable to me that the Terminator flees the scene with its target only several yards away. I realise it's been damaged in the crash, but we see this thing get run over by a truck, and even gets blown up and still keeps coming after Sarah later on. It's a very minor plot hole, but I just thought I'd mention it. Anyway, Reese is interrogated at the police station, while Sarah is informed of the death of her friends. We're introduced to Dr. Silverman, played by Earl Bowen, who doesn't seem to have much of a bedside manner.
Your doctor.
Criminal psychologist.
It's during Silverman's questioning of Reese that we get another example of the terrific way this film handles its exposition. While everyone thinks Reese is crazy as he explains what the Terminator is and where he comes from, for us, the viewer, since we know that Reese is telling the truth, we're given vital information that fills in the backstory behind the future war. Why the Terminator killed the other Sarah Connors, and why they couldn't bring future weapons back with them. It shows how this movie took its low-budget limitations and was economic with its creative choices, as to why we don't see things like the actual time machine and the final battle against Skynet. We don't even get to meet John Connor in this film, because we don't need to. What matters is what's happening here in 1984. It's also here that we get some more fun comedy with Traxler and Vukovich.
What about when he punched through the windshield?
He was probably on PCP. Broke every bone in his hand. He wouldn't feel it for hours. There was this guy once. You see this scar? Here. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the Terminator makes its way back to its apartment to repair itself, in a great example of the unique makeup and Terminator model effects provided by the legendary creature effects creator Stan Winston. While this doesn't look totally convincing compared to what they can do nowadays with computer graphics, at the time this was cutting edge stuff. Back at the police station, the cops convince Sarah that she's safe and advise her to rest until her mother arrives.
You'll be perfectly safe. I got 30 cops in this building.
What could possibly go wrong? So the Terminator shows up, now dressed in the iconic leather jacket and shades, pretending to be a friend of Sarah. When he's told he has to wait, we get not just the most iconic line of the franchise, but of Schwarzenegger's entire movie career.
I'll be back. I'll be back.
She'll be back.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.
I won't be back.
So the Terminator takes the direct approach, crashing into the station with his car and starts massacring all the police in his way. This is probably the most frightening scene in the film, as even Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees would probably think twice about taking on an entire station with armed police, and proves to Sarah and the audience that there is nowhere that she will be safe from this machine. It's here, unfortunately, that Traxler and Vukovich meet their maker as they are killed by the Terminator. Although in a deleted scene, Traxler is seen to survive, and now believed the truth as he gave Reese his gun and told her to do whatever he had to do to protect Sarah. With Reese and Sarah escaping from the police station and the Terminator, they later rest in an estuary, where Reese tells Sarah more about the future where he's from. The future war flashbacks are so incredibly well realised by Cameron and his team, especially given the film's limited budget. It really conveys a nightmarish future that's quite frightening. It's here where we see that Reese is a picture of Sarah that will be a very important part of the film's ending, and conveys that Reese has strong feelings for Sarah that go beyond simply wanting to, as he says it, to meet the legend. This poignant moment is interrupted as the base is attacked by a Terminator, who is here played by Arnold Schwarzenegger's real-life friend, Franco Columbu. This particular shot is my absolute favourite of the film, and really captures the film's nightmarish tone. Back in the present, Reese and Sarah find a motel to stay the night, and start making homemade bombs to prepare for the battle ahead. However, Sarah makes a crucial mistake phoning her mother at her cabin, where we quickly see that the Terminator, having learned of its location in her notebook, has already paid a visit. Sarah unwittingly gives up her location to the Terminator, though he is nice enough to give her some reassuring words.
I love you too, sweetheart.
This is a relatively small scene, but it's incredibly well directed. We never even see Sarah's mother in this film, but Cameron manages to convey that she suffered a violent death with the way the camera slowly pans over the damaged room. It really leaves it up to the audience's imagination what happened here. Sometimes implied violence is more frightening than actually showing it. We then come to probably the most crucial scene of the film, as that night, scared at the thought of the Terminator finding them eventually, Sarah gets Reese to open up about his feelings for her.
I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have.
This scene is incredibly well written and acted. Michael Biehn is absolutely outstanding in this scene. Terminator fits into so many film genres: action, science fiction, horror, but it's here where we see that at its heart, it's a very bittersweet love story. Kyle Reese is one of the most tragic characters in film history. He went through life experiencing nothing but pain, loss and hardship, and when he finally finds happiness, he dies soon afterwards. In fact, during my most recent rewatch to prep for this video, I realised that this movie has something in common with Cameron's later blockbuster, Titanic. In both movies, a young couple fall in love, spend one night together, and the man dies protecting the woman he loved. Anyway, later that night, the Terminator finally closes in on Reese and Sarah. I love the fact that a barking dog is what tips the pair off. When you think about it, that dog saved humanity. So the final chase begins as Reese and Sarah take off in a truck and the Terminator pursues on his motorbike. Reese deploys his homemade bombs, but to little effect, and gets shot, but Sarah manages to run the Terminator off the road. It's here as the Terminator loses its shades and gets run over by a tanker truck that looks more and more like a decomposed muscle-bound zombie. Other films in the franchise have the Terminator suffering battle damage, but it's here where it looks truly horrific and scary. Terminator kills the truck driver and tells his shocked friend to simply get out. That guy is going to have a hell of a story to tell his friends. What I've always found interesting here is that even after getting run over and damaged by a truck, it just reminds you again that it's just a cold machine underneath that flesh. Anyway, Reese and Sarah try to escape on foot as the Terminator drives after them and attempts to run them down. But Reese uses one of his last homemade explosives and blows up the truck. In true horror movie fashion, the film lulls the audience into a false sense of security. I mean, there's no way the Terminator could have survived that, right? It's here as the Terminator burns that it reminds me the most of Michael Myers from Halloween. It really hammers home the film's horror movie roots. This particular image of the Terminator endoskeleton rising out of the ashes is one of the most iconic of the series, and one of the first images James Cameron drew after his nightmare in Rome. I don't care if the stop motion effects here as the endoskeleton chases after Reese and Sarah is dated. I think it looks more scary than anything CGI can come up with today. And the best special effect, of course, is the actors' great performances. The more convincingly scared they are, the more we are. The shark in Jaws, for example, might be fake, but part of what made that film so scary was the incredible acting by the likes of Roy Scheider and Richard Dreyfuss. As Reese looks like he's going to succumb to his wounds, it's here where Sarah starts becoming the true leader she's destined to be, and the way she orders Reese to his feet like a general. She's not just a scared little girl anymore. This whole ordeal has hardened her up. Reese finally meets his maker as he takes on the Terminator armed only with a metal pipe, but manages to almost destroy it with his last homemade bomb. Reese's death here is truly heartbreaking, as it occurs just after he found happiness for the first time in his life. This is followed by one of the best jump scares in movie history, as Sarah isn't given much time to mourn, as what's left of the Terminator lunges after her. This is part of the reason why I rate this film much higher than its sequels. You just note that in this film, if the Terminator lays its hand on its target, it is dead. None of this throwing people around nonsense in the likes of the fourth movie. Anyway, Sarah finally manages to finish off the Terminator by crushing it in a hydraulic press. Despite Sarah's victory, it's a very bittersweet one as Reese is dead. The film cuts to several months later as Sarah, now several months pregnant, records her experiences for her future son. The true genius of the film's simple, but highly effective time travel plot comes full circle here, as she gets her photo taken by a small boy. The photo that will eventually find its way into the hands of Reese in the future. It's a beautiful moment, but also a very sad one, as she's told by the gas station attendant that there's a storm coming, and the final shot is extremely ominous, as she drives straight towards it, knowing that the nightmare is only beginning. The Terminator, for me, is by far the best film in the series. While the later sequels had bigger budgets, bigger action, and better special effects, they were entirely different films in terms of their tone, and were more tailored to Schwarzenegger's heroic big screen persona. This is really the only film in the series where Arnie was the actual villain, the true Terminator. His cold, calculating demeanour and physical presence made the character both terrifying and unforgettable. Hamilton's turn as Sarah Connor was also incredible, as she transformed from a naive young woman to a hardened warrior over the course of the film. For me though, the true unsung hero of the film was Michael Biehn as Reese. He has one of the most tragic character arcs in science fiction cinema, and was the true soul of the movie. This is easily, for me, the best performance of his career. And I'll never understand why he didn't become a major star after this. He seemed to be typecast as tough soldier types for the rest of his career, but would work with Cameron again on his next two films, Aliens, and especially The Abyss, where he would prove he was just as convincing as a villain. The Terminator's influence can still be felt in modern pop culture. Its sequels and spin-offs have continued the story, while its blend of action, science fiction, and horror has inspired countless imitators. The film's themes of man versus machine and the potential consequences of technology remain as relevant today as they were in 1984. Overall, The Terminator is a classic of the science fiction genre that explores themes of technology, destiny, and free will. Its iconic characters and memorable action sequences have made it a cultural touchstone, while its cautionary message about the dangers of technology remains a timeless warning. On its release in 1984, the film was a surprise hit with cinema audiences, making nearly $80 million against its low $6.5 million budget. The film was also received very well by critics, and is now considered one of the greatest science fiction films ever made. It solidified Schwarzenegger's status as a leading man and launched James Cameron's directing career. Despite this success, it would take 7 years before the inevitable follow-up film, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, would appear. And that's the movie I'll be taking a look at next time in this series. Thanks for watching this video. If I haven't bored you too much, please like the video. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Share with your friends. Click the bell for notifications. And let me know in the comments, what's your favourite scene in The Terminator? I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.